SpeedGrade includes a lot of tools that allow for you to work with stereoscopic material. It actually starts right from the beginning. So I'm going to open my desktop, and it shows a left and a right eye sequence for one shot. And all I got to do is to click stereo here in my timeline setup options, and then I can bring material to the timeline just like that. SpeedGrade has a way of identifying left and right eye folder structure, so it will immediately bring both left and right eye into one sequence on the timeline. So this actually is really good, because once we get into the grading part and doing everything else that the application is cool for, you don't have to actually manually keep track of what's happening to left and to right eye. I can immediately hit play and see the sequence. I typically actually, if this is really just the first time I'm looking at it, prefer to go to the slate, because this is helping me tremendously to do the first steps to make this work. So the first thing I can do is just look at the real assignment, just really take a look at where the material is coming from. And the right one is coming from the right eye folder track, and this one is coming from the left, so I'm not worried about swapping eyes. But obviously from the slate, you can see that the right eye actually is mirrored. It's coming off a beam splitter, so that's really just to be expected. I'm going to mirror that one, and just for safety reasons, I'll also let it roll until we're coming down with the slate. And if I really want to be sure, I'll just see that again. Yep, coming down on the same frame, so we don't have sync issues. In case we do, there are ways of just really adding offset for either left or right eye, so it's really super simple to make sure things are properly in sync and it's producing a really nice and enjoyable stereo picture. Now, going to the next tab here, this is actually presenting me with all the tools I need to make sure that the geometry between left and right eye is just really a proper match. So let me show you these tools just one by one. I'm going to go into a difference mat mode. I've got several viewing options, but this is really the one that I like best for doing this kind of work. And we'll get to something more interesting, because the camera actually might move, and obviously I want to make this right for the center part of that shot. So just really to double check, that's indeed what I want to do. And even in side-by-side mode, a couple of things are actually obvious. For example, there's a little bit of a colorimetry shift, and we'll get to that in a second as well. But just looking at the geometry, nicely aligned. I'll quickly just really eliminate parallax on her, because we're always mostly interested in the talent and making sure we're eliminating any kind of other offsets. So there actually might be a little bit of a vertical offset here. It's not much, but I can actually get this to become a closer match. I also sense a bit of rotation, but this is already somewhere down in the dot something degrees, so it's really actually hard to analyze that. And plus, it's rather interactive. Did I actually overdo it with the vertical, and is the rotation then off a little bit because of that? And what if I'm using zoom lenses on the relative scale? So while you do have all these tools manually, and if you're quick at working them, and if you exactly know what you're going for, that's cool. But SpeedGrade includes actually a really sophisticated system of letting you work the stereoscopic workflow just in a lot easier fashion, just by really clicking this match button. And as much as you need to be afraid of everything that's just happen automatically, this thing is actually giving you readout values, so there's no reason not to really just use it and see if it gets it right. And typically it does. For most shots, you're going to notice once you start shifting around parallax, this is now really the closest possible match on all axes we're manipulating. So I've got a really clean shot, and if I want to really go down to numbers, we also have an opportunity to switch the view so you can read out the numbers. So there's a little bit of rotation, a little bit of vertical as expected, but not quite the numbers I was calling. Plus, clicking match is just a lot faster. So at least for daily scenarios, it's really just a perfect tool to make sure you're getting into the right ballpark and then refine it. Now, I already mentioned that there's sort of a color shift. As a matter of fact, it's more like a colorimetry shift, and it can occur just because of a number of things. Like, it could happen because you've got the beam splitter obviously having some refraction issues. There's never quite the perfect beam splitter. It could be the glass, you're using two lenses, all these things. So wherever it's coming from, it's actually really good to know that SpeedGrade has an opportunity to really just take you there and let you see what's happening here. And you can totally see that, in particular on the skin tones, it's not quite the match. So while I could add a color grading track to either one of the eyes and break it apart and just really try to bring it into the same kind of ballpark, it's cool that for at least getting me started with all that, I have yet again the opportunity to click the match button, and you see these three things here. So I just have three different ways of just really putting things together in making the colorimetry match. So let's go back into split screen. So I've got both addressed with one click, geometry and colorimetry, and I'll just actually put the split around here and let you see this with before and after. So before the colorimetry matching, this is what we're seeing with the original recording, and this is what I'm going to get with the automated match. If you want to take it further, absolutely go ahead and do so and just add a grading track for left or right eye, but typically, yet again, this is getting you so close that you get to a really pleasant picture that's worth watching. So finally, obviously, I want to actually set depth here. And that's just really separate from the geometry. So if you need to do fixes, even using the parallax control because something is really out of whack, then you get to something that's really just the creative tool. So this is pretty much the only thing that you're going to touch with someone else telling you, let's push everything further back and make sure it's actually behind screen plane, or let's have her stick out a little and then pretty much create less divergence in the background. This shot is not having enormous depth, so I could place it anywhere. It will actually work no matter what. And this is pretty much it. So I can now take it to any kind of 3D system. SpeedGrade actually supports a lot of the 3D systems out there just for single screen setups, but you can also use the NVIDIA SDI option if you're running it on a PC to really just feed two separate streams left and right just out to your projection system. So it's widespread in terms of what you can do workflow-wise, and it's really versatile. And talking about the creative tools, I actually forgot to mention one really important thing here, which is the creative tool to work with floating windows to really either cover violations to the left or to the right, and we can skew them and really just make them work any way we'd like. Use the keyframing options that the product brings to the table. So all the things you really need to do to make sure whatever is happening with your picture, you make it smooth, you make it a pleasant experience to watch. So eventually, we're now going to get to the fun part, which is grading that. So in SpeedGrade, as everything is a stereoscopic pipeline from the very beginning, you can expect the grading tools to work in stereoscopic space just the same. So here's the cool thing. I'm now into my look design area, and I can easily really just, for example, bring up the gamma, add a little more light to the scene, and also bring up the gain a little. You'll notice this is actually left, this is right eye. So SpeedGrade is immediately going to apply to both left and right eye. It's treated really as one stream, as one picture with a left and a right eye component. So this is super easy for all the tasks you need to do, like shot matching, like reapplying looks. All the things you're familiar with, the 2D workflow, are still applicable here in 3D. There's no extra step involved once you get to fix geometry and colorimetry. And that is a quick overview of SpeedGrade CS6 and its stereoscopic features.